Hello, Tansa Miyogisagao. Hello, good day. Sandra Lamouche Nitsigasun Nia Nihiao Esqueo. Hello, everybody. My name is Sandra Lamouche, and I'm a Cree woman. I'm a member of the Big Stone Cree Nation, and my father is from Gruard, Capoeino First Nation. So under the Indian Act, I'm only able to register under one of their nations to get my Indian status. So it's one of the ongoing ways that we are being oppressed and facing an erasure of our Indigenous identity. I approached the John Humphrey Center this year, and we've been doing a little bit of work together. I wanted to put together this panel to talk about genocide denial, and specifically in regards to residential schools in Canada. I wanted to open the session by starting with a video that I created, which was funded by the Calgary Arts Development. This video is called Honoring the Children, and it serves to honor the children that survived residential schools and those who did not. And so I'm going to share. Oh, I don't think I learned how to share videos on this.
I think there's a option at the bottom where it kind of shows open share menu.
Yes, if a moderator or someone could help figure out how to share my screen, or if they could share the video. The support would be appreciated.
Yeah, I don't know very much about the tech side of things, but I can try and help as much as I can. Do you see there's kind of almost a TV screen where it says open share menu at the bottom of your panel? Or kind of bottom of the web browser? Yeah, it would be in the same space as the stage button or the stage audio, this enabling captions.
There should be an Ed in this session to be a support.
Yeah, he's commenting in the menu, or he's commenting right now.
Hi there, can you hear me?
Otherwise, we could move on.
Sandra, can you hear me? Sandra, can you hear me? On the bottom, there's an open share menu button. That's where you can share your screen. Sandra. Celine, are you able to hear me? Celine, are you able to hear me? Okay, Sandra, there's a share menu button on the bottom panel. It says mute stage audio, enable captions, mute audio, unmute video, open share menu. Sandra, are you able to hear us?
Okay, since I'm not hearing anything, I'll just continue on. So I'll start by asking Sandra to introduce herself and the other Sandra. And yeah, if you could do an introduction, that would be great.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Sandra. It's going to be a little confusing.
You're muted
here with I shouldn't be muted. Can you hear me now? Edward, are you able to hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you, Sandra.
You still have the mute button on. I'm going to try to unmute you.
I'm not muted.
Unmute. Oh, I'm not able to.
Sandra, you need to unmute stage audio.
Okay, so I'm just going to carry on. Hello, everyone. Thank you for the introduction, Sandra.
You're still on mute.
It's going to be a little confusing in here with the two Sandras, but my name is Sandra Relling. I am currently
We can't hear you.
Of the 60 Scoop Indigenous Society of Alberta. I'm not going to continue until we get this technology issue figured out, because I don't think Sandra is able to hear anybody. So I'm just going to pause with my introduction and carry on once we get this sorted out. So my apologies for the delay, and we will chat again soon.
I need to contact Sandra because she has her stage audio muted, so she can't hear anyone else on the stage. The other Sandra, do you mind sharing me her contact information?
I figured it out. Sorry, I didn't know that was a thing.
Sandra, are you able to hear us now?
Yeah, okay. I
Okay.
missed that whole thing, but yeah.
Oh, sorry, on the bottom, yeah, there is a mute stage audio, so you must have had it muted. But on the bottom, there's also open share menu, so you can share your video with us. You see
Open
that?
share menu, yes. Yeah. Okay.
Open share menu will allow you to share your screen, so you can share your video first, and then you can continue. And yeah, just make sure the stage audio is muted so you can hear the other speakers. Okay.
Okay. Sorry, I didn't get the link to figure this out before the conference. It was a little bit behind, but so I apologize for not being as prepared as I normally am.
No problem. Let's begin with your video. Did you still want to share your video there, Sandra? Sandra, can you please unmute it? We can't hear your video. You need to unmute your screen share. When you're sharing your screen, you need to make sure the system audio is displayed. Like, can you please stop sharing your screen? And then when you open the share menu again, can you please share your system audio?
It's just a share screen.
There you go. Perfect. Awesome. Okay.
Yes, so on the share screen there is there's a share system audio button.
Also share tab audio. And
yes,
it's
please.
On.
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay. That should be good. Yeah.
Okay. And also unmute.
Yes.
Okay. Where did that go now?
Yeah, honoring the children right there.
Okay, awesome. Okay.
So go ahead and play the honoring the children clip that you had.
Hello.
Cliff, can you please mute your audio?
I'm sorry?
Can you please mute your audio? Sandra, are you having trouble sharing your video? Please share your entire screen and share it with system audio, and then begin your video.
Yeah, it says
Mhm.
it's working on my end. It said it
Okay.
was sharing the video, so
That's fine. When you open the share screen from the share menu, what do you see on your screen? It says a Chrome tab, window, or entire screen, right?
yeah, I was using the entire screen.
Okay, so when you're using the entire screen, can you please indicate also share system audio on the bottom?
Okay. Sorry, I didn't know it changes.
Yeah,
with
you need
each
to
tab.
enable it.
Okay, I'm gonna do a Chrome tab instead because I don't know why it's not sharing from there.
Sandra, if you have a web link, like if you have a YouTube video link, you can send it in the chat and I'll share it for you.
Yeah, it's it should be able to play from here.
Sure. Perfect. We can hear it now. Awesome.
They tried to bury us, but they didn't know we were seeds. And we grew into medicine and not the weeds. And we are the healing that this world needs because we nourish the spirits that hunger with greed. And no matter how much they try to kill the Indian inside, our culture and ceremony and languages are alive. Mio Pimadiswin, it means the good life. And this is how our whole nation survived. And these are the teachings that allow me to strive. Because my vision for the future is for all children to thrive. So their self-determination is not a struggle, but a certainty. And their voices are heard with resounding clarity. And their history is understood not as myth, but factually. And they speak their language fluent and eloquently. And their knowledge is seen as beneficial to everybody. And we all feel connected and live together in unity. Because the opposite of colonization is indigenous sovereignty. All right, that was my short dance film that I created, and yeah, shared across Canada, art galleries and film festivals. So for the children, and not only that went to residential school, but thinking about the children now and into the future. Do we have a moderator that will take over? If not, let's have Cliff introduce himself.
Everybody hear me? So good afternoon. I'd like to, I don't know what time of day it is where you are, but I'm in London, Ontario. My First Nation, the Oneida Nation of the Thames, it's about a half an hour west of here. So it's about just almost 1:30. And so in our language, I would like to greet everybody and say Sagoli. And that, in our language, that means hello, friends, basically. And I should mention that I guess maybe a couple of things and introduce myself. So I wanted to just add that even though I'm from Oneida, I have been kind of adopted and basically adopted Lakota customs and ceremonies and became a sun dancer and pipe carrier. And so in the Lakota language, they would say Mitakiope. Mitakiope means my relatives. And so I just wanted to open very briefly with introduce myself and saying hello to everybody. And I'm happy to join you today. Did you want me to go on? I can go on.
No, we could go back to Sandra. And did you talk about some of the work you did already, Sandra? No, okay. Maybe we could do that. Sandra Relling and then Cliff, and just briefly talk about some of the work that you do, please.
Absolutely. And good morning again, everyone. I'm glad we got everything all ironed out and things look good to go. And good morning to my fellow panelists, Cliff and Sandra. It may be a little confusing with the two Sandras here, but we are going to carry on and really talk today about genocide and genocide denial. And I'm really excited to be a part of this panel. My current role is as president of the 60 Scoop Indigenous Society of Alberta. And I'm originally from the Alexander First Nation, just northwest of Edmonton. I was apprehended as an infant and taken to really what amounts to a foreign land, even though it was an hour and a half away from my community. I was apprehended out of the Charles Camsell Hospital and taken to live with a non-Indigenous family. And that's where I spent the rest of my life until I reached 18. After then, my parents were very supportive in me learning about my roots, and went into the Department of Indian Affairs at the time, found out I had status, and then started really the journey of reconnecting to my culture and to my community, and have really had a blessed life learning all about this. And for me, it's really important because 60 Scoop is very not often talked about, and we really need to be on the map of that part of Indigenous history in this country that we call Canada. Our lived experience is very important when it comes to genocide and genocide denial, because we absolutely fit the criteria of the United Nations Declaration on Genocide, in that we were forcibly removed from our homes and placed in different homes. So we had no touch with our indigeneity, no touch with our culture or ceremonies. And it's those things that we've had to relearn, most of us as adults, and going forward and trying to heal those things that we've lost. And I'm really grateful to be on this panel today. So I'll pass it back over to you, Cliff.
Thank you, Sandra. So just getting back in terms of my experience, in 2018, I created a new organization, which I call the Indigenous Justice Network. And so I'm the president of the IG, I just call it IGN for the initials of the organization. But before that, I worked, I guess probably in all for about the last 40 years working in the criminal justice system. And I worked in a federal prisons based in Kingston in a mid to late until 1991. So at the time that I was in Kingston, the prison for women was the only federal prison for women in Canada. And so I worked with a Native Sisterhood out of P4W. And so, in fact, on January 8th, a week from today, I will be celebrating 44 years of sobriety. So I mentioned very briefly that even though I'm from Oneida, so as a Oneida, we refer to ourselves in our language as Haudenosaunee, people of the Longhouse. And so, which is indicative of a matrilineal society. I follow my mom. So I'm a Wolf Clan after my mother. And so, but when I went to a, what's known as an Indian Day School. It's called the Mount Elgin Indian Day School. And so Mount Elgin actually operated as a residential school before it became designated as a day school. And so when I was, in fact, it's kind of a very kind of distinct memory that I have. I just ended up being at Mount Elgin in grade 3. So that makes, so it was probably around, I was around the age of 8 years old when I was taught by the teacher. And it's a vivid memory etched into my mind. But she was a history teacher, and she had a book, and she was standing in front of the class. It said Canadian history, and it was a red maple leaf on the cover. And so during her depiction of history, according to the Canadian history book, she referred to the Iroquois people. So even though I mentioned that we refer to ourselves as Haudenosaunee, people of the Longhouse, we're also known as the Iroquois Confederacy. So Oneida is one of 6 nations that belongs to the Confederacy. So there's Oneida, Mohawk, Cayuga, Onondaga, Seneca, and Tuscarora. So those are the 6 nations. And so, but more collectively at that, this was in the 60s. So I don't know if either of you were born in the 60s yet, but that was me. Anyway, so when I was being taught about the Iroquois people, I recall that the teacher referred to the Iroquois people as savages and as pagans. And it was kind of really shocking for me to hear that. Like I said, I was only 8 years old. I was in grade 3. So I was shocked to hear this portrayal of our people in the Canadian history book. But I think what was even more shocking was the fact that the teacher was also Oneida. She was from our community. In fact, I knew her, and I've known her all of my life, and so, but when she said that we were savages and we were heathens and this and that, in my young 8-year-old mind, two things. One, I knew she was lying, but I think, well, in the 60s, having been born in 1960, we were of the era that we were taught to kind of respect authority and respect, especially people of authority and people who are older than us. And so, as a history teacher, I kind of felt maybe inadequate to challenge, the teacher and say, "You're lying." And because I couldn't utter those and say you're lying, our people are not savages and we're not heathens, and so the only way that I had to really kind of evaluate what she was saying, because she's reading from a Canadian history book. She's a teacher, and she's teaching us what people were being taught in Canadian history at the time about our people. And so, so from that vantage point, there's not a whole lot that I could do as an 8-year-old to challenge, an older person than me, like a teacher, a person who has, a place of respect in society. And so, kind of in retaliation, I would run away every day from school. And I remember as I was running down down the hill, because the Thames River was not far from. I'd have to pass the Thames River to get to Oneida. And then every day I'd hear the principal hollering over the PA system, "Well, Sumners, you get back here." Because, I ran from school. So the only way that I can challenge the fact that I really didn't agree with the way that we were depicted in history, I ran away. And so consequently, I guess I never really, I hated school, to be frank about it. And so I really left school after 3 years of trying to finish grade 9. I never finished grade 9, so I don't even have my high school education. And but I have 4 children, and the older 3 from my first marriage have all finished post-secondary education, either in university or at college. And so I'm kind of proud of the fact that they didn't have to experience, what I did, or even more so what my mother had to experience. So I'm Oneida, but I don't know my language. My mom never, and my mom, who passed away in 2005, she wrote a Oneida English dictionary. And so, so even though she founded the Oneida Language and Cultural Center, I never learned my language, because she learned when she went to residential school that she would be punished for speaking her language. And consequently, she never taught me the language. And so I don't speak Oneida. In fact, I probably speak more of the Lakota language, especially because I'm a singer, than I do my own mother tongue. So anyway, sorry, I kind of got a little bit carried away, but that was just a kind of an introduction, just to tell you a little bit about my background. So I'll leave it at that.
Oh, thank you. I just saw that I was unmuted, so I'm sorry if there's any writing and noises like that you heard. Yeah, thank you both for sharing. I introduced where I'm from, but I also have, that history of intergenerational impacts. 3 of my grandparents went to residential schools. Both of my parents went to day schools. My maternal grandmother is the victim of an unsolved murder. So missing and murdered Indigenous women is a cause that I've been advocating for over a decade as well. But I was lucky enough to grow up with some culture and language with my family, close to the land as well. I remember being on the land, seeing the beadwork my mom did, going to round dances and having that connection. My parents were sober, and myself, I'm going to be 16 years sober on my birthday next year. And so I understand like some of that, but I also have, language speakers in my family, drum keepers, medicine men, hunters, trappers, all of this Indigenous resilience as well. And so I felt growing up that lack of representation and Indigenous history and knowledge within the school system. And I was lucky enough to be a good student, a good girl, right? Growing up Catholic. It was until university that I started to learn Indigenous history. And I have my degree from Native American Studies in 2007, and just recently got my master's as well in Indigenous Studies. And with my sobriety, ceremony and culture was such a huge part of that. So I'm also a hoop dancer. I'm a champion hoop dancer, and I've been able to travel the world doing that. I'm also involved in ceremonies, but I don't often share that because I just don't feel like I want to talk about it that way or use it in that way. Not saying that other people are, but just that personally, it's not something that I share a lot of publicly. That's my personal choice. And then, I also am an author. I have my first children's book, which I've been doing readings. We Belong to the Drum. It's about belonging and Indigenous culture and history. And then I have 2 more books coming out, a youth novel and another picture book with Orca Books. So I use storytelling. The hoop dance is a storytelling dance. So I use stories in a lot of what I do. I'm a researcher and consultant. I work with provincial, national organizations, public speaker. I do keynotes, and I've done TEDx talks. So I use that storytelling in all of what I do and try to ground it in that. And I just feel like stories are so powerful, the way we tell our stories, and the stories that we tell, and the stories that we make sure we continue on. And so in terms of, genocide denial and residential schools and the taking and separation of Indigenous people from our culture, our land, our languages, I just try to integrate that in my work. And I've been working in education. I did over 10 years working in education, and lots around reconciliation, and read through the TRC book several times. And so I do work around that. This is the book. I have it here. I've been using it for some of my other projects and consulting stuff that I do. So I have a master's, and I like to focus on wellness, dance, story, and the power of that. I do research, independent research, and that type of stuff. So I'm very passionate about human rights issues, justice, equality, equity, and climate and environment. And those are all things that are symbolized in the hoop and the hoop dance. So the circle, the symbol of the circle, represents all of that. And I'm going to stop there with my sharing. And that's just a little bit about getting to know me.
Thank you so much, Sandra. And my apologies, everyone. There were some wires crossed as to who was moderating this panel, so I joined a bit late. But thank you all so much for introducing yourselves. And I wanted to start you off, I guess, with just a very very general question. I was listening to each of what you shared and sort of hearing the different ways, the different sort of acts of genocide, the different ways that it manifests here on Turtle Island. And I was wondering if you could each speak a little bit to maybe the ways that you see genocide denial in the work that you do, the different ways that it appears, whether it's, institutional, whether it's, you talked about the destruction of culture. So maybe I'll start with Cliff, if you wanted to start us off, maybe a little bit, talk about that.
Okay, thank you. I'm not sure if I missed anything, Ali, because you're kind of in and out. So, but if I miss something and you want me to elaborate, you can just maybe tell me to expand on something. So I mentioned that in 2018 is when I created a nonprofit organization called the Indigenous Justice Network. I really did that because I was concerned. I mean, I talked about, having worked in a federal prison system back in the 80s. And then after working in Kingston, I went to work at the Aboriginal Legal Services of Toronto. I was the executive director there. And so I kind of, like I said, I spent many years working in a criminal justice system. But in 2018, well, actually even before that, leading up to when IGN was incorporated, I have continued to have a relationship with a lot of the men and women who I met in the prisons. And so I'm always in touch with, in fact, I've Sundance with many of them. Some of the men and women who I met at some of the federal prisons, we became Sundance family afterwards. And so I kind of have, I guess as Indigenous people, we can't help but be confronted with various iterations of contact with the criminal justice system, either directly or through family. And so it's always remained to be a very significant and important aspect of what I saw. So I left ALST, Aboriginal Legal Service of Toronto, in '96. Then I moved to, I was living in Pine Ridge in South Dakota for a period of time. But when I able to work in prisons as liaison workers. And so when I so because I didn't want to leave a vacuum, because, you know, like I did leaving, I didn't want to leave a vacuum, because that's, you know, considerable amounts of experience working is on one issue or the other. You know, beat up by the government, and when we get scooped up, we get you know, because, you know, it takes a long time for us to both acquire knowledge, experience that we have as advocates. So when we're gone, you and so to try to ensure that I was going to be able to leave some kind of a legacy behind after I left, that's why I created the Aboriginal Justice Counselor Training Program. And so I went on, I was in Pine Ridge for a while, and doing this and that, and a few other things. But, you know, the one thing that kind of disturbed me, it shocked me, ever before. In fact, in 2021, for the first time, Indigenous women are 50% of the federally sentenced women in Canada. And so, you know, that's why I have curly hair, curled my hair. But, you know, it's something that should be shocking to our people. You know, collectively, as Indigenous people right across the country, we only maybe make up 5% of the whole population in the country. Yet in prison, we're, you know, as much as 50%, and in some prisons, especially out west, even in believe it or not, higher than that. And so you would deduce from that fact that we must be, you know, criminally inclined as a group of people, which is
Oh, Cliff, I think we lost you. Is it just me? No? Okay. I'm not sure, Cliff, if you can hear us, but unfortunately you've frozen.
oh no, sorry, okay.
Oh.
Can you hear me now?
Yes, you're back now. Sorry about that.
Okay. I got carried away.
No, not at all.
I was just saying that in 2021, you know, that's when we discovered the 215 students who were in unmarked graves at the Kamloops Indian Residential School. And so out of, I mean, and I think collectively as Indigenous people, speaking personally for myself, you know, I've been in a state of grief and grieving ever since. And so, you know, I mean, I don't know if it's just a reflection on my age, but, you know, I can be very emotional, and I found myself breaking down quite a bit, thinking about the fact that, you know, how is it that our children who went to school could end up killed, being found in unmarked graves, and you know, mass graves even. how is that possible? Like,
I think we've lost Cliff again, I'm afraid. So I'm just gonna maybe pass it over to Sandra Relling. I'd love to hear what you have to share, your thoughts about where you encounter genocide denial in the work that you do.
hello?
I think it's really the denial is not just with mainstream society, but with our communities too, in that a lot of people don't understand the impacts the 60 Scoop has had on society and on Indigenous people. Because we grew up away from our communities of birth, and have had no real attachment and have had to work really hard to maintain a relationship or reignite a relationship with our home communities. A lot of people who have grown up within those communities really don't have a good understanding of the things that we have gone through as 60 Scoop survivors and the child removal policies of this country. And a lot of times we hear, oh, well, you were better off. And that isn't necessarily the case because, you know, some of us were used as slave labor. Some of us were used as farm labor. And a lot of people, what we're finding is they don't want to accept that, you know, perhaps their neighbor was fostering an Indigenous child. And all of these things are coming out, and they were living down the street from them and had no idea that these abuses were happening. It's a constant denial of where we've come as Indigenous people, in that 60 Scoop survivors, yes, we did grow up away from the culture. Yes, we didn't have any direct link to ceremonies, but some of those things are very innate and really held tight within our DNA. So you feel those things very, very internally. And people say, well, you know, we have our Indigenous communities who say, well, you don't know anything about the culture, so you're not one of us. You're an apple. You know, we are, a month ago, I had an epiphany that I was a victim of an attempted genocide because I was taken from my community literally by force. And if that isn't human trafficking, I don't know what is. And call it whatever you want, but it really was human trafficking guised in policies that the federal government put forth for Indigenous people. We're still very much led by the Indian Act. And, you know, I agree with Sandra in that, when are we going to have that self-determination? But we're not going to be able to get there until people start understanding the history of what happened to Indigenous people in this country. And whether they accept it or not is one thing, but it really needs to be taught. It needs to be understood. There is no reason why this can't start in early education so that Canadians have a better understanding of what it's like to be an Indigenous person in this country. As well, there's nothing in Canada immigration and the tests that people have to go through to become Canadian citizens. It speaks of nothing or very, very minimal things about Indigenous people in this country. We are the keepers of this land. And until some of those things start being recognized for what they are, the genocide denial is always going to exist. So I think collectively, as Canadian citizens here, we all have a role to play in getting beyond that hurdle of genocide denial and really breaking things open. like you never hear about the 60s scoop. We're only starting to come into light. We are very much living in the shadows of the residential school system, but we are byproducts. Our traumas, while very similar, they are very different. So you can't silo us into these boxes and expect us to thrive and heal from the things that have been committed, these acts of genocide that have been committed against Indigenous people in this country.
Thank you so much, Sandra. Like, that really, really resonates. And I also appreciate you've already started to talk about some of the things that people can do to combat that denial. Sandra Lamouche, I'd love to hear your thoughts.
Thank you. Yeah, I agree with what everybody is saying. And in terms of like, we all have internalized some of that denialism in ourselves because of the way we were taught in the Western education system. But I just wanted to add to that in some of the anti-racism work that I've read, we can't blame other Indigenous people for their internalized colonization, or else somebody I talked to recently said that it's a trauma response. They don't say it's internalized racism or internalized colonization. They just say it's trauma. It's a trauma response. So we can't blame any Indigenous people for that trauma they've experienced, right? Even though we might think they're colonized, in denial, that kind of thing. Like, I feel like it just best practices to have that understanding and that humility and that respect, and to try to just continue to teach and make people aware and educate and share that knowledge, right? So genocide denial is like the totally denying, but it's also the minimization of genocide. So I've seen it a lot around residential schools with teachers of like, well, they learned to read and write, and you know, this trying to justify that. And I've seen some people, you know, deny that there's like, they want to see bodies, you know, they want to see bodies. And in the TRC, they used millions of documents. I can't remember how many million, 5 million documents and 7,000 survivor statements. And so they've done their work. They talk about the burial policies and the unmarked graves. So it's not something that just happened in Kamloops all of a sudden. It's not that, right? And so lots of people say, well, why didn't I know, right? And people knew. You weren't listening before. And so this Kamloops thing just like bursts the door open, where now people know, now people are listening, now people are concerned, right? And like shocked by what happened. But it's already in here. We already knew. And so part of the denialism that I see is this like, oh, why all of a sudden? It's like a big conspiracy theory that all of a sudden there's children's bodies. And no, we have stories. My friends have stories. My friends have, you know, their parents have gone to pick up their children, and they don't come out. Like, we already have this. So part of it is, I think that's one of the things that I've seen. But in the TRC, they talk about how the purpose of the residential school was to enforce this idea that European knowledge was superior. And so it's based on this white supremacy culture ideal of European is better and Native is inferior. And yeah, like Cliff was saying, like savage, right? That kind of mentality. And so if you look at curriculum today, it still privileges those Eurocentric ideas, histories, ways of looking, ways of knowing. So it's still there, but we don't say because it's superior. It's just like underlying the school system, right? And so for me, I think that the ongoing genocide is also in the curriculum and the way we teach, because part of what genocide includes, the convention, is causing harm. I think it's physical, causing bodily or mental harm, inflicting conditions that bring destruction in whole or in part to the group. And so even that, like, even part of our destruction, right, is still just in the school system. But yeah, in the 60s scoop, and now we have the millennial scoop, the ongoing foster care system, we still have that too. And yeah, we're just learning about the 60s scoop, but what about the millennial scoop? Like how much more do we go through, right? And I live in southern Alberta, so I went to the U of L, and we had a woman, maybe I won't say her name, but she was coming to speak, and they did a protest, but she was one of these people that is pushing the genocide denial kind of narrative, right? She didn't end up speaking there, but to publicly speak, you know, in Canada, people have been charged under the criminal code for denying the Holocaust. And when it comes to Indigenous people in residential schools, we don't, you know, we need to see that happen. We need to see that punishment to publicly promote genocide denial. The House of Commons recognized residential schools as a genocide I think just within the last year. So for me, I think it's pretty serious, and there should be the same consequences that other people face for other denialism. Yeah, I'm gonna give the floor back to you.
Thank you so much, Sandra. And I think that's really important too, that piece about genocide denial, not just being in those active attempts to deny what's happening, but also in the erasure of the various acts of genocide, like not having access to clean water, and the fact that that's not known by so many folks outside of Indigenous communities, or the existence, the reality of the 60s scoop not being something that's recognized, and that too is an act of genocide denial. We have a question in the chat, but Cliff, I think we have you back, and I wanted to give you a chance to just finish up your remarks because we lost you there at the end. Can you hear me? Yep, good. Well, go ahead.
Can you? Am I in here?
Yeah. Yes, I can hear you.
I was leading up to talk about actually on October 1st last year, and hosted the first of what I called the. And so that was basically an attempt in our early effort as an organization to be simple for the fact that we have, you know, this long-standing crimes against humanity. And, you know, it's even more kind of in the midst of the fact that, you know, here we are celebrating or commemorating the 75 Declaration of Human Rights was first launched. And that was, and so by the way, on December 10th, that's going to be the actual official 70. But there was another organization, there was another UN, including by Canada. It was called the, you know, it was a UN genocide. So that was also signed in 1948. You know, another thing that, you know, Canada kind of did, or, you know, kind of are kind of, and by the, so this is the 75th anniversary, also the so-called, you know, the Geneva Convention. Essentially is, you know, the rules of on the war front. So, you know, in the midst of two global wars right now, Ukraine by Russia, and we have what's going on in Israel against the Palestinian people. So, in the midst of those two, you know, we kind of lose sight of the fact that the idea of the Universal Declaration of a signal to say that the atrocities that were placed during World War II would never be. So when Canada and the world, the rest of the world, signed and the Declaration, the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, it was that, you know, we were going to try to do better, and so so last year, like I said, I was talking about the conference against genocide. He held that in Ottawa, and so that was kind of like the beginning. You know, can be probably a long-term journey. Not only Canada accountable for genocide, but, you know, they have people who are, you know, known as accomplices. All of the churches and churches were the organizations or the structures, the entities, the policy. Canada signed its statute and is an official policy in 1883. Canada took over the residential school policy. But in order to implement the churches of the country, and then they also created the Northwest Mounted Police, now known as the RCMP. RCMP were given the responsibility of enforcement. And so, you know, the fact that, you know, some of the comments that you both have made about human trafficking is, you know, it's spot on, because, you know, so is it reflective of what actually happened, but the fact that there were agencies, including like the RCMP, but a government policy that crime against humanity, against our children, against. So last year, like I said, you know, we had the first of, and I expect that it's going to take many, probably arrive at a time when we can say, as a country, that we're satisfied that, you know, that we're on the way of healing and having been healed history and or dark chapter in the history of this country. So I wanted, that's what it was, the fact that we had this world conference. But I wanted to, so we talked about the fact that, you know, the TRC, the Truth and Reconciliation, which ended in 2015 with the delivery of what they called the 94 calls to action, which, you know, what the TRC, the commission, had provided is a kind of how to overcome this. What is now? It's going to be someone's goal. When the Mohawk Institute was built, which is the oldest residential school in 1831. Canada didn't become a country until 18. So when the Mohawk Institute was built, it was built by what was known as by the Anglican Church. But the Anglican Church is also known as the Church of England. And so, you know, not only is Canada guilty of the policy that basically it's a policy of genocide against our people, especially against the children. And so, you know, in 1828, when the Church of England built the Mohawk Institute, you know, we're right now we're in 2023. So replete with this whole dark part of Canadian society, and you know, known as the Indian Residential School. And so now, you know, we have, I mean, this is the first time I heard the term, the millennial scoop. But yeah, I mean, it's even worse than the 60s scoop. So, you know, we need to kind of hold Canada to the fire, and you know, because these policies didn't end. So maybe they closed the last residential school in 1996, but the effects, the legacy continues. And so until we, so for one thing, you know, residential schools were known to not only take us away from our communities, but take away our languages, take away our culture. Some of the ceremonies that, in fact, some of the Sundance ceremonies probably still on the books is being
No, Cliff, we lost you again, I'm afraid.
If I can just jump in here for a minute,
Sure.
I just wanted to address that as part of trying to get rid of genocide denial, I think it's very important that people start listening to those of us that have actually experienced this form of genocide within this country, and not put the cart before the horse, because there's valuable teaching. We've learned a great deal of what happened in residential schools. We've learned a great deal of what happened in Indian day schools. We're still not hearing anything about the 60s scoop, but all of a sudden we've jumped on to modern day child welfare. And I think we have to follow a linear path to get a better understanding of what the impact this has been and what it's caused to Indigenous people in this country. You know, I've long said that this country was built on the backs of Indigenous children, and I will go to my grave fighting for that cause so that people are aware of the impact that this country has had on Indigenous people of this land. And I know in the chat there was something about what needs to happen to bring about meaningful reconciliation. And I think we're a long ways away from it, to be perfectly honest, because people are still denying that these things could happen, or how could this have happened in my backyard and I didn't know about it? Well, you know what? History is told from the lens of the oppressor, and it's the oppressed who really have to educate the people about the oppression. So my challenge to everybody is start doing your own research and finding out about what the impacts that this has had on Indigenous people. I bet people in the session here aren't aware that Adolf Hitler took his Coles notes from John A. Macdonald and what the residential school system was built upon, and use that. So when you're talking about people getting charged for Holocaust denial, I am appalled that it is still not equally said about Indigenous people and the genocide that's happened in this country. Our Constitution doesn't even reflect what the United Nations Convention on Genocide says. They are two separate things. And why is that? And why aren't people lobbying their MPs to make those changes? We can't. We've been doing this for generations, trying to get this word out, trying to speak about what the oppression has been and the impact it's had on Indigenous people. But until mainstream society starts doing their own research and realizing what we've been saying all along is true, there is not going to be a significant change and a move towards reconciliation, because that truth really needs to come out, and it needs to come out very broadly.
Thank you, Sandra. Absolutely. I think that there's a reason that truth and reconciliation are presented together. The two are essential, to essentially connected. Sandra Lamouche, I wonder if you had anything to follow up on.
No, I agree. I think it was in the TRC that there's like 4 stages that we need to go through, and one of them was awareness, acknowledgement. Atonement was one of them. I forget the 4th one. I was just trying to look it up, but yes, awareness is an important part, and acknowledgement, like not just being aware, but acknowledging, oh yes, this happened and it did cause harm and still is causing harm. And so, yeah, I didn't mean to jump over like minimize the 60 scoop, but I'm just saying that we still have the legacy of residential schools, of genocide, removing children, right? It's still ongoing. So that's the point I was trying to make, not to say we need to ignore anything else. It's all part of it. Yeah, so that's it.
Yeah, thank you. And I think that speaks to what Cliff said as well about the RCMP and their role, and like seeing how these things don't go away, they just transform into a different, give it a different face. So I'm conscious we have about 8 minutes left in our time. So I wanted, starting with you, Cliff, I wanted to invite everyone to sort of share any closing remarks. Cliff, can you hear me? We had you there for a second, but I think you're frozen again. No? All right, well, maybe I'll pass it to Sandra and we can close with Cliff if we get him back.
All right. Well, Cliff is very knowledgeable, so that's unfortunate. My closing remarks, I think, are just, I think using that word genocide, using those, naming those things. I've been doing a lot of anti-racism work, speaking and stuff, and naming those things, figuring out what it means. White supremacy culture, what does that entail? What is genocide? What is in the TRC? You know, what, just that, using the proper, correct terms when possible, using the tough language and starting to speak from that place of truth and honesty, as difficult and uncomfortable as it may be. That's what allows us to grow and overcome things, right? It makes us stronger. So that's my closing statement.
Thank you, Sandra. And Sandra Relling, I think I just wanted to, we have Cliff, and so I'm singing just because we've lost him a couple of times. Cliff, do you want to share any closing remarks? Cliff, can you hear me?
Oh, hi. Hello.
Hi. Sorry. Yes, we've lost you a couple of times, but we're just wrapping up, and I was wondering if you wanted to share any last thoughts.
Yeah, I guess I was looking for a note. I wrote a note that you know, and getting back to the TRC, the 94.
Internet is not being our friend today with Cliff, unfortunately.
Basically against genocide. And so I think, you know, if we're going to talk about reconciling, or I mean, I don't even like using the word reconciliation because of the fact that the root silly is in the in the word. So, you know, so what I call, so in fact, what I call it is reconcile action, you know, because we have to actually demonstrate. It's like when I talk to children or youth, and for something, you can fall for anything. And so I think, you know, one of the things that we need to do collectively to take collective action is that Canada no longer stands for is going to be known for genocide, particularly against children. In fact, again, against women, girls, and school children.